I'm going to be talking about skills as documentation today. This is something close to my heart. So I'll get the old slides rocking here, and then we'll go. We'll go. Okay. Chrome, share. You can see Chrome, slideshow mode. We're professionals. Okay. So my name is Chris Alexiuk. I'm a senior product research engineer at NVIDIA, and I work primarily on the Nemotron family of models at Team Green. So that's what I do. There you go. Nice to meet everybody. Uh, we're going to talk today about documentation and skills as documentation. So this is a big one for me. I spend a lot of my time reading docs, looking at docs, writing docs, specifically when it comes to, models and how they interact with documentation is a big focus. So, what is documentation? Obviously, you can read the slides. Like documentation is how we know how to do stuff, right? So, documentation comes in many forms. It's not just like API snippets. Docs are everywhere. The README is a documentation asset, right? Watching a tutorial video is documentation. All of these things are quote unquote docs. And the reason we have them is because it's not trivial or intuitive to use a lot of tools that someone else has spent many years producing, right? So, obviously, documentation exists across the board, right? So, like you need documentation for your washing machine, for instance, right? It's not just something that exists in code, but we have a very specific usage pattern when we're talking about documentation for technologies, APIs, libraries, and things of this nature, which is that we want to know how to use it so we can achieve some task. Right, no one suffers through reading docs for fun, just to expand their knowledge. They read them to know how to do something, and knowing how to do something is kind of the end goal of documentation. The interesting part, though, is that they are designed for us, the fleshy meat bags. They're not designed for our up and coming robot friends, right? So the idea here is that documentation is dope, but it's written for us. We ingest information in very specific, particular ways, and we've built our whole kingdom of documentation on the fact that someone with eyes is going to read this. And this is kind of where things are shifting a little bit, right? So, can goes stale. Excellent job. My apologies. We'll fix that before sharing it. So documentation can go stale. I mean, versions have never been changing faster ever. If you look at something like probably the most visible example of this right now is like OpenClaw. OpenClaw is pushing like 700 features a minute, I think, at this point, right? And the documentation needs to somehow keep up. Not all of these features can just gracefully exist behind the scenes and non-disruptively, change how we interact with the application. The documentation needs to evolve quickly. This is something that is, it's possible to offload this to the agent, right? We can just say, agent, write the docs, bro. It's all good. But we kind of lose something there in that, we're now having this system design documentation primarily for itself, right? We know that agents are great at writing documentation that they can read. But it's not super for humans, right? Beyond that, even if we have agents actually produce our documentation for us, it's like who's reviewing it? And then who has time to read 30 new pages of docs every 6 days, right? It's not me. I imagine it's not a lot of people. Though there are a few. Docs are also designed to make more accessible the technology, and this is a interesting double-edged sword, right? So, make more accessible means that we necessarily have to have these assets and have these constructs be like quite uh accessible. By nature it means that we're losing depth, right? We have to stay close to the surface, at least in a lot of documentation, before we can dive deep. And now we have this kind of really interesting problem where we have to dig deeper in order to really understand the technologies we're using, which is not super in my experience, right? The idea is that we have to start shallow and then get deep, and the engineers who are producing the features might be able to start deep, but they're building features, right? They're not spending all of their time writing cool docs, and so we wind up having this gap, which is we lack the bridge from this the shallow intro to true depth. You can always read the code, or at least sometimes you can read the code, but at the end of the day, you're in 2026 into 2027. If you spend 3 hours reading and understanding code, you probably could have built a feature by having your swarm of autonomous agents hammer away at it. Oh, what am I doing here? Okay. Documentation is written for humans, but there's a robot among us reading our docs. This is the idea, right? So we have this new entrant into our doc space, which is the agent. And the idea is we need docs for agents because human docs are for humans. They have a bunch of limitations. So what is the solution for right now? One of the solutions is skills. Skills are actually incredibly useful documentation tools. I think obviously they're useful at like getting your agent to do cool new stuff. They're useful at like helping you do PRs and reviewing code and all these other things. But they're also really useful to teach someone how to use your library or help them use your library or get them to a point where they can start comfortably using your library by kind of giving you that middle layer, right, that exists between the documentation for us and then some separate documentation for our very smart ghosts in the machine. So skill.md is like a big markdown file, and possibly, hopefully more that gives the AI agent instructions for specific tasks. It helps set context. The agent also has access to things implicitly that humans might not think to check, right? So the agent knows what operating system it's on in most cases. The agent is aware of the tooling that it can use simply through nature of brute force. As well, the agent is aware of some preferences for technology that the user might have through things like what Ben was just discussing, which is, your agents.md or your Claude.md, whatever version of this you're using, where you've said something like, I only like Bun, or you must use UV at all times, or I have a server with the GPU that you can access here. Our agent always remembers that stuff. Always probably strong. A lot of the time remembers that stuff if we include it in those project specific or top level markdowns. We have open standards for skills, which means that we can put the same skill.md files basically everywhere at this point. It is supported by a lot of the more popular agent frameworks, and if it's not supported, it's trivial to add support. We get this power of like progressive disclosure, right? Which is basically just we don't got to pollute the context window straight away so much, which is at least in my idea, highly ideal. And then of course there's new libraries writing up or popping up all the time to write them, test them, organize them, version control them, and package manage them. The moment that we introduced skills, we decided we needed to reinvent the kind of DevX ecosystem that exists around everything else. And so, I mean, this is a great thing, right? Things like Hugging Faces skills library is very useful here. We're getting better at evaluating skills, and all of these things mean that it's starting to feel like something similar to docs, right? Where we have these assets or these pieces of information that help us understand how to do the thing, and we care deeply about it, and we keep it up to date and all these kinds of things. So we're going to go to the next slide, which is just a table, which represents the information we've been talking about so far, so we can see it in table form, which is basically like traditional docs are for humans, skills are for agents and humans, and you might not like me for that one, but I do think that you can learn something as a human by reading the agent documentation. This is something that I think is really important to keep in mind when we're producing skills, is that we do want humans to be able to read them, to understand them best. Maybe it's just how to understand when to use them best. Maybe it's to understand exactly what they're doing and what some side cases or limitations are. But I do think that skills should still be written in a way where humans can parse them, at least for right now. The format, though, is obviously going to be a little bit different. The docs are come upon by humans, but the agent is going to load it up when it makes sense, or the human can invoke it directly, which is still an awesome pattern. The goal is a little bit different for docs. It's to help explain so that you, the human, can execute, versus skills, which is equipping the agent with the tool to execute. Freshness. Docs do go stale real quick, guys, in modern times. Skills can be version controlled a little bit better. We're going to talk about why in just a second. And then the output, understanding, and action. Classic. Okay. So skills are not just something that is like a fad or whatever like that, right? Though of course they may eventually lose out in the long run because things shift very quickly these days. Right now, though, they're they're adopted by infinite people, basically just meaning most of the libraries you're going to use are going to have some concession to skills, and this is because it is just so useful to be able to pop up Claude, say, how do I do this? And a skill tell you how to do this. And then you're cooking with gas right away. There's like 10,000 plus skills that I scraped, just now from popular libraries. Uh, we have a bunch of centralized repositories for skills. That's a deeper discussion that future us will figure out, right? What's the best way to disseminate skills to the masses? Uh, and then you got to have some kind of this is the X moment for Y. And so this is the README moment for clause and whatever, open code, Claude code, whatever tool you're using. But the idea is that uh, this is the same as when we first thought, oh, we should put like how to run the library in a README next to the code. So you don't have to read all of the code to understand how to run it, right? This is the same thing for using these autonomous agents. Uh, so I got the green behind me, wearing the NVIDIA shirt today. And so how are we using skills? Well, NVIDIA uses skills a lot. Our team, the product research engineer, has been doing the layman's version of skills for a very long time, which is something I'm sure all of you are familiar with, which is like sharing prompts, right? Sharing few shot examples for specific downstream tasks, sharing, our particular set of instructions that helped us do tasks better that we shared in a common repository. We have a better name for it now. It's catchier, it's more exciting, which is skills, right? And we're working hard to make sure that all of our repos are set up for skills. You hear a lot about like agent X, right? So this is like DevX, but for agents, agent experience. And I think one of the things that people get trapped with something like skills is like agent X is not actually for agents. I mean, it's important to make them go burr so that they can do stuff, but like that, the impact is DevX, right? If you can pop open a repo, open code in the freshly cloned repo, and say like, hey, this is what I want to do. Let's do it. And you're able to see, this unfold before you. I mean, that is good developer experience, right? So, that's why I'm framing this through the lens of documentation. It's also something we can be a little bit tricky about as the writers of these skills, which we're going to talk about in just a second. Which is like we can use this to help teach people as opposed to just help them get stuff done for them. Maybe that path should exist, but skills can help people understand how to use your library. The way you ask questions of the user during the usage of a skill, for instance, right, is going to help them understand what your library is capable of doing and what it's good at specifically. That kind of thing is really useful to help people understand what you exist for. And so we can actually help teach and educate people more about our technology through skills sometimes because it's part of a kind of uninterrupted and pleasant experience that they have while using our technology. So it's something I want to make sure people don't sleep on that, you know, Skills is documentation isn't saying just write a skill that does it for someone. It's saying literally think of this as we would documentation. How would you guide a user through the quick start experience of your technology? That's how we should be writing skills. Is and this is like the natural next question, right? Is AI the best at writing skills? And the answer is like pretty much no. AI is great actually at writing parts of skills, and I think the skill distillation libraries like Hugging Face's library is great at this, right? Where we take big model, we use it to write a skill for small model. Like that's still an effective pattern, but the idea is that LLMs are good at writing some part of the skill. But what we find is that the best skills come from literally trying to do the thing with the agent, discovering where kind of the friction is, and then using the skill as a way to mitigate the friction. And there's a number of ways we can mitigate friction. We can improve our library. We can improve literal human documentation, right? We can improve the skill itself. But all of this is best discovered by using the tool. There you go. Okay. Skills, though, they come with limits. So, as Ben wrapped up his discussion, some people were talking about things like Agent MD, sometimes not performing the best. The same is true of skills. There's a whole brand new slew of issues that come with skills. Context windows, even with progressive disclosure, it's still possible your skills are hurting more than they're helping. Routing brittleness. This is the idea that like if we get the wrong skill, it's just worse than if we got no skill, right? Because we're polluting our context window for no reason. So skills aren't like a free lunch, right? And because of that, we have to think deeply about how to implement them. And there you go. Skills also don't replace tools. We actually need the tools a lot of the time. We should still be building systems that are easy to use for humans and AI. It's not like because we have skills now we can just like YOLO complex features. We want to make sure that we have actual useful technology, and we're not using the skills to bridge the gap. The same way that we don't want our documentation to act as an excuse for complexity in our library, right? It's like, oh, my library is the greatest in the world. You just have to read 15 man pages before you can use it. It's like, is it great technology? Maybe not. Same thing with skills. We don't want it to be used as like a crutch to uh, let us excuse or absolve ourselves from writing too complex technology. And stale skills are the worst because they're a authoritative source that says to do something wrong. And this is where our good friends, the AI, can help us whenever we make changes. If those changes touch skills, they can either flag skills that need to be updated or do some of those updates themselves, depending on the scope of the changes to the skill. I come to you with an ask on this very ominous red slide. Please write skills alongside your docs, not instead of them. Again, skills are not a crutch for documentation. Good docs should still exist and are still useful to agents. Treat skills MDs like your README, version control it, review it, share it. You should have many team members reviewing these skills. We've also found that you should have engineers working on the products write these skills. It's not like just the AI's job, right? You need that subject matter expertise. And every time you do something more than once in your tool, right? If you find yourself reaching for something, but if maybe it shouldn't be a feature, right? Because it's like it's a weird side case, or it's just not that interesting, or it's just routine monotony, or it's involving some other packages. Make it into a skill, right? Do some evaluations, see if people like it. Documentation got us here. Skills will get us there, wherever there happens to be for you and your org. That's the presentation today. Basically, I can show you kind of how we think about this by showing you an example here. of a skill we have in our data designer repository, which is you know, make some new SDG. And the idea is that like this is still a human readable document. It's still formatted nicely, but it is also just instructions for the model. It gives us some quick ways to get started, and that is the idea. Thank you so much, guys. I've been Chris, and if you have any questions, please ask them.